It's a special Saturday edition of Locked On Blue Jackets, and we've got Jared Brown back to tell us all about Swiss prospect Marco Kasper, how he could fit in on the Blue Jackets, and who the Blue Jackets could draft 12th overall. All that and more on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, who are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day, or your first watch of the day if you are joining me over on YouTube. If you are not joining me over on YouTube, then maybe you should be, because YouTube is where it's at. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available no matter where you watch or listen to it. You will never have to pay for a Locked On Podcast Network product. So today is yet another prospect profile. We're going to round out our week of draft coverage by talking about Marco Kasper, who is a really exciting Swiss prospect that could fit in surprisingly well on the Blue Jackets. So we talked to Jared Brown of Draft Pro Hockey all about that. So I will just get right into it. So speaking of Europeans, we've talked a little bit about a North American skater. Let's talk a little bit about Marco Kasper, who is, again, a name that I was kind of familiar with right up until they posted the rankings, and he was a little bit higher than I expected him to be. What can we expect from a guy like Marco Kasper every time he steps on the ice?
Yeah. Every time he steps on the ice, what you can expect from him is to play with a ton of compete. His work ethic is going to be as good as anyone else. I think he's someone that has so much maturity in his game, and that's what has allowed him to play in the SHL and play meaningful minutes. I mean, they got eliminated, I believe, his team got eliminated, I believe, in the second round of the SHL playoffs, but he was playing second or third line minutes, and I think that just speaks to the maturity of his game, and how he plays with a lot of really solid details. There's not a lot to complain about in his game. I think the biggest thing for him is he doesn't have a wow factor. He's not dynamically skilled, but he's very shifty with the puck. I think the best part about his skating is his edge work, and he's able to kind of control the puck in tight situations, below the dots in the offensive zone. In the corners, he can spin off pressure, and that can buy him some more time and space, and then he can find a passing option from there. So I think that's the best thing about his skating. And for me, sometimes it's better to have that than transitional speed, because it's kind of funny. I've talked to some other scouts about this, and it seems like the game slows down more when you actually get to the NHL, if you think about it. In junior level, the game is very wide open because structures aren't as strong. There's more mistakes happening, leading to more odd man rushes, right? In the NHL, that doesn't really happen, which means you need to find ways to generate more offense, more chances in half ice scenarios or from the blue line down and in that offensive zone. So if you got good agility and you can spin off checks to give yourself more time and space, and you're not getting squashed up along the boards in those situations, then I think you're going to have success in the NHL, and that's what Kasper is really good at. And so I think he's a really, really solid pick for anyone who drafts him, and I think he could play sooner in the NHL rather than later.
Kasper's another one of these players that is listed as a center on Elite Prospects. Obviously, we talked a little bit in yesterday's episode about is Karagosier a center or a winger? Obviously, he's a winger. Is Kasper a legit center, do you think? I don't know
Mhm,
that he's a number one center, but is he
mhm.
a guy that you think could be a top line winger or kind of maybe a middle six center, or like where is he a
Yeah.
legit pure center, do you think?
Yeah, so I think he is, he's different from Cutter Gauthier, where Casper's played on the wing in the SHL a bit. Actually, not a bit. I'd probably say a decent amount. He's played on the wing in the SHL, um, but he's a natural center in my opinion. He is a natural center, and where I think he fits perfectly would be in a middle six role, like you said. I think in a second, I think he's got the ceiling to be a second line center, but if he doesn't get to that potential, I could see him being a really strong third line center and even potentially being a shutdown center because of how mature his game is and how defensively you know how good his defensive IQ is and how good he is off the puck. So I think he could develop into a shutdown role down the line. And that honestly could be like in 5 6 years, right? I mean, I don't think anyone thought. Trying to think of a name, David Kampf with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think when he was if he was drafted or he was signed out of Europe. I don't know exactly, but when he started with Chicago, I don't know if it was him to be a shutdown center, and now he's with the Toronto Maple Leafs and he plays that third line center and he plays in a shutdown role. I mean, they never start him in the offensive zone, and he plays penalty kill, and that's where I think Marco Kasper is. And but at the same time, like I said, I think Kasper has a ceiling of a second liner.
In a minute, I've got more of my conversation with Jared about Marco Kasper, but first I've got to tell you about Built Bar, because Built Bar has a brand new flavor that I am just the most excited about. Imagine dipping your finger into, that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting, and then you open your eyes and you realize it's only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That is what it is like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built Bar. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I have never had anything like this before. They are hands down the best Built Bar flavor. They're available right now, and I can't promise that they will still be available tomorrow. So run, don't walk, all the way to built.com. Built Puffs are a protein infused marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate, and you can make every day your birthday with Built Birthday Cake Puffs. Here's the best bit though. If you go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, you can get 15% off your order, and that's basically like a birthday gift every day. Use promo code LOCKED15 once again for 15% off at built.com, and make sure you get a box of the birthday cake puffs while you still can. Yeah, and this is something that I talked about with Will Scouch the other day. Actually, is we were talking
Hmm.
about Kirill Marchenko and this weird kind of assumption for a lot of people is that if a player goes in the first round, they have to be a top line star player, and sometimes that's just
Hmm.
not the role. And so I think sometimes you have to look at a guy and be like, oh, cool, a second line center, because I don't think if you're a second line center, then that means you are one of the 64 best centers in
Yeah,
the NHL, or
yeah,
of
pretty
all
much.
hockey players, ideally. Because if you're in
Hmm.
the NHL, chances are you're one of the best players. And I know that that's not a bad thing. And I think if you top out at second line center, especially a guy like Casper, who looking at the rankings is kind of predicted to go anywhere from kind of about 14th all the way up to 27th.
Yeah.
I think second line center for a guy that goes in the second half of the first round is
Hmm.
not a terrible way for that development to end.
Yeah, I look at him as like you say, he's gonna either go higher than I expect or he's going to drop and it'll be a bit surprising. But I don't see a lot of holes in his game or even red flags in his game. And normally when a player drops, that means there are some red flags in his game. It could come down to sometimes it also can come down to fitness level, and only the NHL teams will know that from the combine. Um, and so, I have no idea what Casper's physical shape is. He seems like he's in really good shape, just the way he can battle and play through contact at the pro level in the SHL. Um, but I see him. I honestly, I could see him being a sneaky. Uh, I could see Detroit picking him. I think Detroit picks like eighth or ninth overall. I think I
I
could
want
see
to say
Detroit.
nine. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see Detroit picking him. Just like it's kind of like a cider pick. Like
Yeah.
it was out of the blue. Uh, People did not expect cider to go then, and now you look at that selection looks like a genius move. And I think you could see Casper going that high because I think Detroit's got a little bit of that. We like him. We know who he is. We don't care about other rankings or whatever. We're going to pick him here. And even if they pick him ninth overall and he becomes their second line center, that's still a good pick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, especially Detroit, who like Dylan Larkin is probably gonna be their number one center for a very long time.
Exactly.
So like
Exactly.
they're not looking for the next Dylan Larkin yet. The kid's what, 20, 24, maybe
Yeah.
25.
Oh yeah.
Like,
He's still like
he's
he's
probably
still
got 10
waiting
years
to hit his
left, you know?
yeah. Oh, he's still waiting to hit his prime. Probably, you could say, right? He had a
Yeah.
really good season this year. Um. And so I think you're not really gonna find a center that's going to leapfrog him. So like
Yeah.
I said, but that's one thing I think Detroit is missing is a second line center right now. They
Yeah.
have Joe Veleno, who maybe could get there. They have some other prospects in the system that I think maybe they have high hopes for, but um, I think Casper would be a sneaky pick. I think they probably wouldn't go for that. I could see them going for someone like Connor Geeky with that size, but I don't know. That's my wild prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, Detroit, Steve Eisenman seems to be on that same level of Yahweh Kakalainen of like, we have our plan. We're not going
Yep.
to tell anyone what our plan is. We're just going to pick who we want to pick instead of going with like the consensus pick. But
Yeah.
I guess that leads really nicely into kind of the question of Columbus is drafting obviously sixth overall, which you talked about last episode. They've also got their own pick at 12th.
Yep.
Do you think Casper is a potential at 12? Is that a pick that makes sense to you,
hmm
or if not, who do you think the Blue Jackets take at 12?
So I think it could be. The thing is with the Casper, if Casper is a potential for them at number 12, is I look at him and I look at Cole Sillinger and I think the same,
Mm,
right? I think two guys that you would maybe so let's say Casper gets drafted 12th overall. I think you're looking at Cole Sillinger and you're looking at Marco Kasper and you're looking at both of them saying one of you is going to be our future number one center. Fight for it, which could be internal competition is always very good for a team in my opinion. But I don't think either of them have the ceiling of a number one center. Um, so I think Casper, like I don't know if he would be the best selection there. I really would like to see Columbus probably pick another skilled winger to help out the offense. And I mean, the offense wasn't really an issue this year. It didn't seem like, but I think the more skill you have, the better your team is. And at the end of the day, you can offload those skilled players for better to balance out your team, right? I mean, if you have too much skill, it's that's never an issue in my book. You can never have enough skill, and if players are getting pushed out of the lineup, well, then you could find them a new home, and you bring in a defenseman in return or something like that, right? And that could be the case. So. Um, when I look at number 12, I would say probably someone I could see like Daniil Yurov, the Russian, who didn't play any ice time in the KHL because I don't know what they do over there because of whatever reason, they'll let you play for the top team in the KHL, but they'll let you up with the top team in the KHL, but they won't let you play. um, so, but he's a guy who he's got a good two-way game. I like his two-way game. I think it's a bit underrated, but he's very, highly skilled, and he's a right winger. I think he slots best on the right wing. And so that's probably a good option for them at number 12. And obviously, there is a bit of a Russian connection with Columbus and draft picks. And so I think that would be a good selection for them at number 12.
In a minute, I've got the end of my conversation with Jared about Marco Kasper and also who the Blue Jackets should draft at 12th and who they could draft at 12th. But first, I want to tell you about BetOnline because BetOnline is the official sports betting website of the Locked On Podcast Network, and they continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. As the first round of the playoffs is starting to wrap up, you can find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including the Stanley Cup playoffs, this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, UFC, boxing, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action because BetOnline is where the game starts. Do you think number 12 is kind of, or not number 12, but this is something I've kind of been mulling over for a little bit. Like, at what point in the first round do you stop picking best player available and start drafting according to your needs?
hmm Um, I think uh, every team should have best player available mentality for the most part. I do understand it from teams that are either tight to the cap or they are expected to be a contending team for multiple years and have playoff runs. Then you need to look at possible pending UFAs in a year or two that you may lose and see if you can grab someone that could replace them in 1 to 2 years. So I would say the only time instead of drafting best player available, I would do it is if I'm a contending team, I know I'm going to have multiple playoff runs, I'm going to have playoff success, and I need entry level contracts to fill out my roster because I'm tight to the cap, right? I mean, every team seemed like they were tight to the cap this year, so I could throw out multiple teams: Toronto, Tampa Bay, Vegas, like all these teams, they're tight to the cap, so they need to hit on these late first round picks that they have. And when those players are on their ELC contracts, they need to come in and make an impact. So that's the only time I would say it's maybe acceptable to draft for a positional need and pass up a player who would be the best player available at the time of that selection.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, two more. We've done a couple more prospects added to my giant list of prospects that I'm like, oh, maybe they should be a Blue Jacket now because I'm very impressionable and
Yeah.
have basically no short-term memory. And so every time I learn about a new prospect, I'm like, oh, shiny new thing.
There you go.
But but yeah, thanks for coming to talk to me about prospects once again. It has been very informative and good. So I appreciate you taking the time to come and explain things in very small words so people like me can understand.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on again. I'm happy to help.
We'll have to we might have time to get one more round of prospect profiles in
Yeah.
before the draft in July. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, sounds good.
And that's about all I've got for you today and this week. You can find Jared Brown over at Jared Brown with 2 N's 97. You can find all of his written work over at Draft Pro Hockey. He's been doing a ton of really great work for the upcoming draft. Make sure you check that out. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. We'll be back next week with more prospect profiles, which you can find over at Locked On Blue Jackets on YouTube, on your podcast apps. We are on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.